What happens when a tech billionaire obsessed with flying cars and space rockets pulls into an Amish farm with no electricity or internet? Elon Musk was at the pinnacle of technological innovation until a chance drive through Pennsylvania farmland stopped him in his tracks. While the world waited anxiously for his next breakthrough, Musk was studying wooden irrigation systems designed by an 82-year-old craftsman who'd never sent an email. In the storm that followed, this unlikely partnership would challenge everything Musk believed about progress. The solution that saved the Amish community from devastating floods wasn't powered by batteries or AI. It was powered by wisdom. When Musk returned to Silicon Valley, he carried a wooden box containing a secret that would fundamentally transform his global empire. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Elon Musk's fingers drummed against the steering wheel of his prototype Tesla as he watched the holographic display flicker with incoming messages. 37 urgent emails, 14 missed calls, and 63 text messages, all accumulated in the 3 hours since he'd silenced his phone. The board meeting is in 2 days. David Langston's voice came through the speakers, tense and clipped. The SpaceX launch is next week. The investors are waiting for your decision on the new battery design. And you're where exactly? Driving through farm country? Elon glanced out the window at the rolling Pennsylvania landscape, a world away from the glass and steel tech campuses of California. The late afternoon sun bathed the fields in golden light, making the scene look almost artificially serene, like something from a bygone era. Lancaster County, Elon replied, watching as a horse-drawn buggy appeared on the horizon, moving at a deliberate pace down the narrow country road. Amish country. Amish country, David repeated, his voice flat with disbelief. The people who reject electricity. You're visiting people who reject electricity. You, the man trying to electrify the entire planet's transportation system. Elon smiled as he carefully maneuvered his vehicle around the buggy. The elderly Amish man holding the reins nodded politely, his long beard shifting in the breeze. The stark juxtaposition wasn't lost on Elon, his silent AI-assisted electric car passing a mode of transportation that had remained essentially unchanged for centuries. Sometimes you need to step outside your bubble to see clearly, Elon said, slowing the car as he approached a small wooden sign marking the entrance to a farm. I've been thinking about sustainability all wrong. All wrong? David's voice rose. Your companies have revolutionized electric vehicles and solar power. What could you possibly learn from a place that refuses modern technology on principle? Elon pulled onto the gravel driveway, the crunching of stones beneath his tires punctuating the silence that followed David's question. He parked beneath the shade of an ancient oak tree and stepped out, stretching his legs after the long drive. That's exactly what I intend to find out, Elon said, ending the call. The farm spread before him like a painting, fields of corn and wheat stretching toward distant hills, a red barn standing proud against the sky, and a modest white farmhouse, with laundry hanging on a line. No power lines, no satellite dishes, no solar panels, and yet everything seemed to function with a precision that even his most efficient factories struggled to match. As Elon approached the farmhouse, a young woman in a simple blue dress and white cap emerged from the garden. She straightened, wiping soil from her hands onto her apron, her expression cautious but not unwelcoming. You're a long way from the tourist areas, she said, her voice carrying a slight accent that Elon couldn't quite place. Are you lost? Not lost, Elon replied. Just exploring. I'm Elon Musk. The woman nodded, showing no sign of recognition at his name. I'm Sarah Fisher. This is my grandfather's farm. A comfortable silence stretched between them as Sarah studied him with intelligent eyes. There was something refreshing about her, lack of reaction to his identity, no flicker of recognition, no subtle shift in behavior that he'd grown accustomed to. Your car, she finally said. Is it one of those electric ones? Elon nodded. It is. A Tesla. Sarah's lips curved in a small smile. Grandfather would be interested in that. Not in owning one, of course, but in understanding how it works. He has unusual ideas about efficiency. I'd like to meet him if he's available, Elon said, surprising himself with the sincerity in his voice. Sarah hesitated only briefly before nodding toward a small building set apart from the main house. He's in his workshop, I'll take you. The workshop was a simple wooden structure, its weathered boards speaking of decades of use. As they approached, Elon heard a rhythmic sound, water flowing and wooden gears turning. Sarah pushed open the door, revealing a space filled with tools, many of which looked handcrafted. In the center stood an elderly man bent over a complex wooden mechanism. His hands, gnarled with age but remarkably steady, made minute adjustments to what appeared to be an intricate system of wooden gears and channels. "Grandfather," Sarah called, "there's someone here to meet you." Isaac Fisher straightened slowly, his tall frame unbending like an old oak. His face was deeply lined, his beard white and flowing to the middle of his chest, but his blue eyes were sharp and clear. He looked at Elon with open curiosity, assessing him without judgment. "This is Elon Musk," Sarah explained. "He makes electric cars." Isaac wiped his hands on a cloth and extended one to Elon. His grip was firm and calloused. "Welcome to our home, Mr. Musk. I'm Isaac Fisher." "Please, call me Elon," he replied, surprised by how much the old man's simple dignity impressed him. "I hope I'm not interrupting your work." Isaac gestured to the mechanism he'd been adjusting. "Just making some improvements to our irrigation system. Come see." Stepping closer, Elon realized he was looking at something far more sophisticated than he'd initially thought. The wooden contraption was part of a larger system that appeared to regulate water flow from a nearby stream to the fields. But what captured his attention was the elegance of the design, a series of carefully calibrated wooden gears and channels that controlled water pressure and flow without a single electric pump or computerized sensor. "This is remarkable," Elon said, bending to examine the craftsmanship more closely. "You built this yourself?" Isaac nodded, a hint of pride in his eyes. "Built and rebuilt over 40 years. Each season teaches new lessons about what the land needs." "But how do you calculate the optimal flow rates, the pressure differentials?" Elon asked, his engineer's mind already working through the physics. Isaac chuckled, the sound warm and resonant in the small space. "I listen to the water. Watch how the crops respond. The land tells you what it needs, if you pay attention long enough." Elon circled the mechanism, taking in the details. "In my factories, we use AI and advanced sensors to achieve this kind of precision. You're doing it with wood and water. We have different tools, but perhaps similar goals," Isaac said, adjusting a small wooden lever that subtly altered the water flow. "You seek efficiency through more technology. We seek it through less." Sarah watched the exchange with interest, her eyes moving between her grandfather and their unusual visitor. "The system waters our entire farm," she explained. "It hasn't failed in 30 years, even during droughts." Elon's phone buzzed in his pocket. Another urgent message, no doubt. He ignored it, his mind racing with questions as he studied Isaac's creation. Here in this simple workshop was a water management system that required no electricity, no rare earth minerals, no complex supply chains, and yet it worked with remarkable precision. "Most people see our ways as primitive," Isaac said, reading Elon's expression. "They think we reject progress, but we simply ask different questions about what progress means." "What questions?" Elon asked, genuinely curious. Elon woke to the sound of roosters crowing and the soft golden light of dawn filtering through simple curtains. For a moment, he lay disoriented in the narrow bed, the handmade quilt heavy across his chest. No notifications. No smart home system gradually raising the lights, just the pure, unfiltered arrival of morning. Downstairs, he found Sarah already at work in the kitchen, kneading dough with practiced movements. She glanced up as he entered. "You're an early riser," she observed, pushing a strand of hair back, beneath her cap. "Grandfather says that's a good quality." "Force of habit," Elon replied, accepting the cup of coffee she offered. He took a sip, surprised by its rich flavor. This is excellent. We roast our own beans, Sarah said simply. She nodded toward the window. Grandfather's in the barn. He said to tell you there's something happening today you might find interesting. Outside, the farm was already humming with activity. The irrigation system Elon had seen yesterday was quietly at work, channeling water through the fields in precisely controlled streams. In the distance, he spotted Isaac talking with several other Amish men near the neighboring property. As Elon approached, Isaac turned and greeted him with a nod. Good morning, Mr. Musk. You've arrived on an important day. The Millers lost their barn in last month's storm. Today we raise a new one. Before Elon could respond, the screeching of tires on gravel drew his attention. A sleek black SUV came to an abrupt stop at the farm's entrance, and David Langston emerged, his normally impeccable appearance slightly disheveled, his expression a mixture of relief and exasperation. 317 missed calls, David announced, striding toward Elon. The board is threatening to hold an emergency session. Twitter thinks you've been kidnapped. Elon cast an apologetic glance at Isaac, who watched the exchange with calm interest. David Langston, my head of sustainable development. David, this is Isaac Fisher. David barely acknowledged the introduction, his attention fixed on Elon. We have the Shanghai factory issues, the battery production deadlines, I'll be staying another day. Elon interrupted. Maybe two. David stared at him in disbelief. You're joking. Isaac cleared his throat gently. Perhaps your colleague would like to join us for the barn raising. It might explain better than words why you're here. David looked as though he might protest, but something in Elon's expression stopped him. Fine, he muttered, slipping his tablet into his bag. But I'm not leaving. An hour later, Elon and David stood at the edge of the Miller property, watching as nearly 50 Amish men gathered around the barn's foundation. There were no power tools, no cranes, no modern equipment, just men with hand tools, ropes, and a shared purpose. This can't possibly be efficient, David murmured, though there was a note of uncertainty in his voice. Isaac, who had been conferring with an older man near the foundation, rejoined them. That's Jacob Yoder, he explained, nodding toward the stern-faced elder. He leads our church district. He's concerned about your visit. I'm not surprised, Elon replied, watching as Jacob cast suspicious glances in their direction. Within minutes, the barn raising was underway. Teams of men moved in coordinated patterns, lifting massive support beams into place while others secured them. Young boys ran messages between groups, and women arrived with food and water for the workers. Elon watched, mesmerized by the fluid efficiency of it all. There was no central coordinator, no project management software, just decades of shared knowledge and unspoken communication. It's like watching a complex algorithm execute in real time, he murmured. David, despite his initial skepticism, was filming the process on his phone. The coordination is remarkable, he admitted. But surely it's not as efficient as modern construction. By what measure? Isaac asked, his eyes crinkling. Speed? Perhaps not. But consider the resources used. No fossil fuels, no heavy machinery that sits idle most of the time, no specialized parts shipped from across the world. By midday, the barn's frame stood complete. As the men broke for lunch, Elon found himself seated at a long table with Isaac, Sarah, David, and several other Amish families. The conversation flowed easily, though Jacob Yoder, seated at the far end, remained conspicuously silent. I've been wondering, Elon said during a lull in the conversation, about your irrigation system, the one you showed me yesterday. Have you ever calculated its efficiency? Isaac shook his head. Not in numbers. We judge by results. The system waters 40 acres with minimal waste. It's been reliable through 3 major droughts. David looked up from his plate. Would you allow me to measure it, for comparison with our systems? Isaac considered this, then nodded. Knowledge shared is never wasted. After lunch, while the barn raising continued, David set up portable equipment near Isaac's irrigation system. Sarah accompanied him, asking thoughtful questions about his measurements and methods. Meanwhile, Elon walked with Isaac through the fields, discussing crop rotation and soil management. Your approach is completely integrated, Elon observed. Every part of the farm seems to support every other part. That's our way, Isaac replied. We don't see the world as separate systems to be optimized individually. Everything connects. As they crested a small hill, Elon spotted a stone windmill in the distance. You use wind power? Isaac nodded. For grinding grain. That mill has stood for over a century. But no electricity, Elon noted. We're not against the concept of electricity, Isaac clarified. We're against dependency. Each technology we adopt must pass a simple test. Does it strengthen or weaken our community? Does it make us more or less self-sufficient? That's a high standard, Elon said. Perhaps too high sometimes, Isaac admitted. But it forces us to consider the true cost of convenience. By late afternoon, David sought them out, his expression one of disbelief. I've run the numbers 3 times, he said without preamble. This irrigation system is delivering 94% efficiency in water usage. That's higher than most of our solar-powered systems. Isaac accepted this information with a modest nod, but Elon could see the subtle pride in his eyes. And the energy input is essentially zero, David continued, glancing at his tablet. Just gravity and mechanical advantage. Our systems require constant maintenance, software updates, replacement parts. You sound surprised, Elon interrupted, a smile playing at his lips. David looked up, slightly embarrassed. I am. This shouldn't work as well as it does. As the sun began to set, the Amish community gathered to share a meal celebrating the completed barn. The massive structure stood as a testament to their collective effort, built in a single day without modern tools. Elon found himself seated beside Jacob Yoder, who had maintained his distance throughout the day. The elder studied him silently before speaking. Isaac says you make electric cars, Jacob said, his tone carefully neutral. Among other things, yes, Elon replied. Jacob nodded slowly. Our ways seem strange to you. Different, Elon corrected. Not strange. In fact, I'm finding them increasingly logical. We've kept ourselves separate for good reason, Jacob continued. The outside world changes too quickly, trades too much wisdom for speed. Elon considered this. What if there were technologies that aligned with your values, that increased self-sufficiency rather than dependency? Jacob's expression hardened slightly. Such as? Before Elon could respond, Isaac joined them. He must have overheard their conversation because he placed a hand on Jacob's shoulder. Elon is a guest, Jacob. He comes to learn, not to change us. Every outsider changes us, Jacob replied, but his tone softened. Even by making us explain ourselves, we see our own ways differently. After the meal, as darkness fell over the farm, Elon found himself standing with Isaac and Sarah near the now silent irrigation system. Stars filled the sky in numbers he rarely saw in the light-polluted regions where he usually spent his time. Your community achieved in one day what would take my teams weeks to execute, Elon said. Without fossil fuels, without complex supply chains, without the environmental costs we're still struggling to address. But we couldn't build your electric cars, Sarah pointed out, or your rockets. No, Elon agreed, but I'm beginning to wonder if we've been asking the wrong questions all along. We've been so focused on what technology can do that we've neglected to ask what it should do. Isaac nodded approvingly. That's the heart of it. David, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. The board would have a collective heart attack if they heard you now. Elon laughed. Probably. As they walked back toward the Fisher home, Elon's mind raced with new possibilities. He turned to Isaac. Would you consider an experiment? I'm wondering if there might be a way to integrate certain technologies into your methods without compromising your values. Isaac glanced at Sarah, who couldn't hide her interest in the question. What kind of experiment? Isaac asked cautiously. I'm not entirely sure yet, Elon admitted. But I think there might be a middle path, one that respects your wisdom while addressing challenges both our worlds face. Isaac was silent for a long moment, and Elon could almost see him weighing tradition against possibility. It would depend on the technology, Isaac finally said, and its purpose. From the shadow of the porch, Jacob Yoder's voice came unexpectedly. Isaac, be careful. This is how it always begins, with small compromises. Not compromises, Elon corrected, turning to face the elder. Collaborations. I've seen enough today to know that my world has as much to learn from yours as you might learn from mine. Jacob remained skeptical, but Isaac nodded thoughtfully. Tomorrow, he said. Tomorrow we can discuss what such a collaboration might look like. As Elon climbed the stairs to his simple room later that night, he paused at the window, looking out over the peaceful farm. In the distance, the newly raised barn stood as a monument to what people could accomplish together, guided by shared purpose and deep knowledge. David's voice came from behind him. You're really serious about this, aren't you? Elon nodded without turning. Completely serious. What if the future of sustainability isn't just about new technology, but about rediscovering old wisdom? David sighed. The investors would panic if they heard you talking like this. Let them panic, Elon replied, a smile spreading across his face. I think we're onto something important here, something that neither world could discover alone. Dawn broke with the gentle sounds of the Fisher farm coming to life. Elon stood at the window watching as Sarah moved between garden rows, harvesting vegetables for breakfast. In just 2 days, the rhythms of this place had begun to seep into him, slowing his typically racing thoughts to a more deliberate pace. His phone, plugged into the single outlet David had found in the barn for emergency charging, contained hundreds of increasingly frantic messages. The world he'd temporarily left behind was in an uproar over his disappearance. Yet here, among the fields and handcrafted wooden systems, that chaos felt strangely distant. At breakfast, Elon and David joined Isaac and Sarah at the simple wooden table. The meal was hearty, fresh eggs, homemade bread, and vegetables harvested moments earlier. I've been thinking about your proposal, Isaac said, passing a bowl of strawberries to Elon. About combining our methods with your technology. And, Elon prompted, aware of Sarah watching her grandfather with barely concealed anticipation. Isaac's weathered hands wrapped around his coffee cup. I have concerns, but also curiosity. Sarah's face brightened. Grandfather rarely admits to curiosity about the outside world, she explained to Elon. It's a significant concession. Isaac gave his granddaughter a look of gentle reproach before continuing. Before we discuss specifics, I want you to understand our life more fully. One cannot improve what one does not comprehend. That's fair, Elon agreed. Good. Isaac nodded decisively. Then today you work with us, no phones, no measurements, just hands in soil and mind on task. David looked alarmed. Mr. Musk has 3 conference calls scheduled today that cannot be postponed. Isaac remained unmoved. If he wishes to understand our perspective, he must experience our life as we live it. Elon considered this for only a moment before nodding. I accept. He turned to David. Handle the calls. Tell them I'm conducting field research that could revolutionize our approach to sustainable energy. They'll demand details, David warned. Then be creative, Elon replied with a smile. After breakfast, Elon left his phone on the kitchen table, a gesture that didn't go unnoticed by Isaac, and followed the old man to the fields. For the next several hours, he worked alongside the Amish craftsmen, planting, weeding, and maintaining the irrigation channels. The physical labor was demanding in ways Elon hadn't anticipated. His body, accustomed to brief bursts of activity between long periods of intellectual work, protested at the steady, continuous effort. Yet there was something undeniably satisfying about the direct connection to the earth, the immediate feedback of seeing work completed with his own hands. Your irrigation channels need clearing here, Isaac pointed out, indicating where silt had built up. The system can self-regulate to a point, but it requires regular human attention to function optimally. Elon knelt in the soil, carefully removing debris from the channel. In our systems, we'd install sensors to detect blockages, then deploy automated clearing mechanisms. And when those sensors fail, Isaac asked, or the clearing mechanisms malfunction, we'd receive an alert and dispatch a repair team. Isaac nodded thoughtfully. So your solution adds layers of complexity that themselves require maintenance. Yes, Elon admitted, but it scales better. One team can monitor thousands of systems remotely. At the cost of direct connection, Isaac observed. No one knows the land intimately. By midday, Elon's hands were blistered and his back ached, but he felt a strange satisfaction. They paused for water, sitting in the shade of an oak tree that Isaac said had been planted by his great-grandfather. You're wondering if it's worth it, Isaac said, observing Elon's exhaustion. The physical toll for such modest output. The thought had crossed my mind, Elon admitted. Yet our modest output has sustained this farm for generations without depleting the soil or requiring outside resources, Isaac pointed out. Can your factories claim the same? Before Elon could respond, David appeared, tablet in hand despite his obvious efforts to respect the no-technology rule. Sorry to interrupt, he said, looking genuinely apologetic. But I've been continuing the analysis of the irrigation system and, well, you should see this, Elon. Isaac raised an eyebrow, but nodded permission. David activated his tablet, displaying a series of graphs. I compared the durability metrics of Isaac's system against our latest solar irrigation models, David explained. Our systems need component replacement every 3 to 5 years. They're vulnerable to software glitches, power fluctuations, and sensor degradation. He paused, glancing at Isaac with newfound respect. This wooden system has parts that have functioned continuously for 40 years with only minor adjustments. Interesting, Elon murmured, studying the data. That's not all, David continued. I ran stress tests simulating extreme weather conditions. Our systems shut down to protect components. Isaac's system actually becomes more efficient during certain types of environmental stress, channeling excess water during storms into storage for drought periods. Isaac listened to this technical assessment of his life's work with quiet dignity. Nature builds redundancy and adaptability into every system, he said simply. We merely follow her example. As they resumed work in the afternoon, Elon found himself watching Isaac with growing admiration. The old man moved with deliberate economy, each action purposeful and precise. There was wisdom in his methods that transcended technological advancement. A deep understanding of natural systems that no algorithm could fully capture. Later, as the sun began to set, they gathered once more at the kitchen table. Sarah had prepared a simple but delicious meal, and the conversation flowed easily until a knock at the door interrupted them. Jacob Yoder stood on the threshold, his expression stern. The elders are concerned, Isaac, he said without preamble, casting a disapproving glance at Elon and David. Word has spread about your discussions with these Englishers. They are guests in my home, Jacob, Isaac replied calmly, and our conversations have been respectful. Respectful, perhaps, but potentially dangerous, Jacob countered. You know how it begins. Small compromises that lead to larger ones. Before long, our young people are questioning the Ordnung, looking to the outside world. Sarah tensed beside Elon, and he sensed this was a debate she had heard, or perhaps participated in, before. I've invited them to share a meal, Isaac said, gesturing to the table. Will you join us? Jacob hesitated, then nodded curtly and took a seat. The atmosphere had changed, charged now with an unspoken tension. Sarah served Jacob silently, her movements more careful, more measured than before. Mr. Yoder, Elon said, breaking the uncomfortable silence. I understand your concerns, but I'm not here to change your way of life. I'm here because I think our world has much to learn from yours. Jacob's expression remained skeptical. Your world has been learning from communities like ours for generations, taking what seems useful, discarding the rest, never understanding that our practices cannot be separated from our beliefs. That's precisely why I'm staying here, Elon countered. To understand the whole system, not just its parts. And once you understand, Jacob challenged, what then? You'll return to your factories and electric cars, perhaps with a few new ideas to exploit. Elon met the elder's gaze directly, or perhaps with a fundamentally new perspective on what progress really means. David, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, spoke up. The data I've collected on the irrigation system here, it challenges many of our assumptions about efficiency and sustainability. If we approached other problems with this mindset, our ways are not mindsets to be adopted or discarded, Jacob interrupted. They are lived commitments, shaped by faith and community. Isaac raised a hand, gently stemming the rising tension. Jacob, I share your caution, but I also believe in engaging, honestly, with those who come seeking understanding. He turned to Elon. You spoke yesterday of an experiment, a way to integrate certain technologies without compromising our values. I'm curious what you envision. All eyes turned to Elon. He had been formulating ideas throughout the day, watching how the Amish systems functioned, identifying where modern approaches might complement rather than replace traditional methods. What if, Elon began carefully, we designed energy storage systems that followed your principles? No electricity grid dependency, no complex components requiring specialized knowledge to repair. Systems that could be built and maintained by the community using primarily local materials but incorporating advances in energy efficiency. Jacob scoffed. And how would such systems not lead us down the path to electric lights, televisions, the internet? Because they would be designed with boundaries in mind, Elon replied. Not as a gateway to more technology, but as contained systems serving specific community needs. Perhaps more efficient water storage during droughts, or safer food preservation methods. Sarah leaned forward, her interest evident. Could such systems be built here, with materials we could source ourselves? That's the challenge I'm proposing, Elon said, looking from Sarah to Isaac and finally to Jacob. If your machines can help us without changing who we are, Isaac said slowly, show me how. The words hung in the air between them, a challenge and an invitation. Jacob pushed his chair back, standing abruptly. This is how it always begins, he warned, his voice low. With reasonable-sounding compromises. He turned to Isaac. Remember who we are, old friend. Remember why we live as we do. After Jacob departed, a contemplative silence fell over the table. Finally, Isaac spoke. He is not wrong to be cautious, the old man admitted. Our way of life has survived because we have been deliberate in what we adopt and what we reject. But, you're still considering the experiment? Elon asked. Isaac exchanged a look with Sarah, some unspoken communication passing between them. Yes, he said finally. With conditions. Whatever we build must be constructed here, with materials we can understand and maintain ourselves. It must not create dependencies on the outside world. And it must genuinely serve our community's needs, not merely demonstrate what is possible. Those are fair conditions, Elon agreed, his mind already racing with possibilities. David and I will need to return briefly to gather some materials and tools, but we could begin within days. That night, as Elon prepared for sleep in the simple guest room, Sarah knocked softly at his door. When he opened it, she handed him a small leather-bound book, my grandfather's journal, she explained. His notes on the irrigation system's development over 4 decades. He wanted you to see it, to understand the thinking behind the design. Elon accepted the journal with surprise. Thank you. I'm honored he would share this. Sarah hesitated, then added, I should tell you that not everyone shares Jacob's resistance to thoughtful change. Many of us recognize that our way of life must adapt to survive, not by abandoning our principles but by applying them in new contexts. Your grandfather seems to understand that balance well, Elon observed. He does, Sarah agreed. It's why he's respected even by those who disagree with him. She paused. Whatever you propose, it needs to honor our commitment to simplicity, community, and self-sufficiency. If it does that, Many will be open to it, despite Jacob's fears. After she left, Elon sat by the oil lamp, carefully turning the pages of Isaac's journal. The meticulous drawings and observations revealed a mind as systematic and innovative as any engineer he had ever employed, but working with different constraints, different goals, and a dramatically longer time horizon. As the lamp's flame cast dancing shadows on the wall, Elon realized he was being offered a rare opportunity to approach innovation from a completely different perspective, one that prioritized durability and community resilience over speed and profit. The challenge before him was not simply technical but philosophical. Could modern technology truly serve human needs without creating new dependencies? Could progress be measured not just by what was gained, but by what was preserved? With these questions circling in his mind, Elon closed the journal and extinguished the lamp. Tomorrow he would begin sketching ideas for a system that might bridge two seemingly incompatible worlds, not by compromise, but by finding the deeper principles they shared. The morning after their agreement, Elon and David prepared to depart, temporarily to gather materials. Isaac stood in the gravel driveway watching as they loaded their few belongings into Elon's vehicle. 3 days, Elon promised. We'll return with only what we need to begin the prototype. Isaac nodded, his expression thoughtful. Remember our conditions. Whatever you bring must be understandable, maintainable, and aligned with our ways. I understand, Elon replied. He hesitated, then added, Your journal was illuminating. The way you think about systems, about balance and longevity, it's not so different from engineering, just with different constraints. A smile touched Isaac's weathered face. Perhaps that's why this conversation is possible between us. We speak different languages, but we ask similar questions. As they drove away, Sarah raised her hand in farewell from the porch, her expression a mixture of hope and uncertainty. Are you sure about this? David asked once they were on the main road. The board is already in panic mode. When they hear you're planning to spend more time developing sustainable technology for an Amish community, they'll think I've lost my mind, Elon finished for him, smiling. Maybe I have, or maybe I've finally found clarity. He glanced at the open road ahead. Call a meeting for tomorrow. Virtual, not in person. I want to explain this myself. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The following days were a flurry of activity. Elon's virtual meeting with the board had gone precisely as expected. Initial confusion, followed by skepticism, culminating in reluctant agreement to what they viewed as an eccentric but potentially marketable side project. Now, Elon and David stood in a massive workshop at the Tesla facility, surrounded by engineers and material specialists, explaining their vision. We need to completely rethink our approach, Elon told the assembled team. No electronics, no rare earth metals, no components that can't be repaired with basic tools, and most importantly, no systems that create dependency. One of the senior engineers frowned. So, 19th century technology? No, Elon replied, pacing energetically. 21st century understanding applied through timeless methods. We know things about material properties, about fluid dynamics, about energy storage that weren't understood when these approaches were abandoned in favor of electrification. He projected Isaac's journal drawings onto a screen alongside David's. Analysis of the irrigation system. Look at this water pressure regulation mechanism. It's made entirely of shaped wood, but the principles are the same ones we use in our most advanced systems. The difference is longevity. This wooden system has functioned for 40 years with minimal maintenance. For hours they debated and brainstormed, gradually developing a concept for an enhanced water storage and distribution system that would incorporate modern materials knowledge while respecting Amish construction methods and values. What about this? A young materials scientist held up a sample of a new biodegradable polymer. It's completely natural, derived from mushroom mycelium and agricultural waste. It's waterproof but breathable, similar to wood but more resistant to rot. could be used to line water storage containers. Elon examined the material, testing its flexibility and strength. This has potential. How complex is the manufacturing process? That's the beauty of it, the scientist explained. The basic cultivation process is actually quite simple, similar to traditional composting methods. The Amish could theoretically grow and form it themselves with minimal outside input. By the end of 2 intense days, they had assembled a collection of materials and designs that might bridge the seemingly insurmountable gap between high-tech innovation and Amish simplicity. The team packed everything into several wooden crates. No plastic packaging, no synthetic materials, nothing that would immediately signal modern technology. I still think this is either the most brilliant or the most bizarre project you've ever undertaken, David remarked as they loaded the crates into a rented truck, leaving the Tesla behind for a vehicle less likely to attract attention in Amish country. Elon smiled. Why not both? They arrived back at the Fisher farm late in the afternoon of the 3rd day. Sarah was the first to greet them, her face brightening, when she saw they had kept their promise to return. Grandfather's in the workshop, she told them. He's been preparing a space for your project. The workshop had indeed been reorganized, with a large central area cleared for their use. Isaac looked up from his workbench as they entered, his eyes curious as he surveyed the wooden crates they carried. We brought only what meets your conditions, Elon assured him. Nothing electrical, nothing that creates dependency, nothing that can't be maintained here. Over the next few hours, they unpacked the materials, explaining each component to Isaac and Sarah. The old craftsman examined everything with meticulous attention, asking penetrating questions about composition, durability, and repair methods. This material, Isaac said, holding a sheet of the mushroom-derived polymer. You say it grows? Yes, David explained. It's cultivated from fungus, similar to how mushrooms grow, but engineered to form these strong, waterproof sheets. The process uses agricultural waste as a food source for the fungus. Remarkable, Isaac murmured, testing the material's strength. And it returns to soil at the end of its life? Completely, Elon confirmed. No waste, no pollution. Sarah, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward. Could we grow it here? Learn the process ourselves? That's the intention, Elon replied. We brought spores and detailed instructions for cultivation. Part of our agreement is that you should be able to produce all components yourselves without relying on outside sources. Isaac nodded approvingly. A wise approach. Now, show me your design for this water system. Elon unrolled several large sheets of paper containing hand-drawn plans. No computer printouts, no digital designs. Everything had been meticulously rendered in pencil and ink. We're proposing an enhancement to your existing irrigation system, Elon explained. A series of strategically placed water collection and storage units that would capture rainfall more efficiently and release it gradually during dry periods. The key innovation is in the storage material and the pressure regulation, David added. Using this fungal polymer as a flexible liner inside wooden cisterns would prevent water loss from seepage while allowing natural filtration. And we've adapted some of your own wooden valve designs to create a more responsive pressure regulation system. For hours, they discussed the design, with Isaac offering modifications based on his intimate knowledge of the land's contours and water flow patterns. As night fell, oil lamps were lit, casting a warm glow over the workshop as they continued to refine the plan. Sarah moved easily between them, sometimes clarifying Isaac's more technical Amish farming terms for Elon and David, other times explaining modern concepts to her grandfather in ways he could relate to his existing knowledge. It's like the way you graft apple trees, she explained when describing how modern materials science had grafted new properties onto natural substances. The same principle, just applied to smaller pieces of creation. As they worked, Elon found himself increasingly impressed by Isaac's practical ingenuity. The old man might lack formal engineering training, but his intuitive understanding of systems and his decades of hands-on experience gave him insights that even Elon's most brilliant engineers sometimes missed. Water doesn't just flow downhill, Isaac explained, modifying one of Elon's proposed pipe routes. It follows the path of least resistance, which isn't always what appears obvious. This valley looks lower, but there's a clay seam underneath that forces water along this ridge instead. By the second day of collaboration, they had finalized the design and begun construction of the first prototype component, a small-scale water collection unit that would demonstrate the principles of their enhanced system. Isaac worked alongside Elon and David, teaching them traditional woodworking techniques while incorporating their material innovations. His gnarled hands moved with surprising dexterity, shaping joins that would hold without nails or glue, creating moving parts that would function smoothly for decades. The secret is to work with the wood's nature, not against it, Isaac explained as he demonstrated how to split a log along its grain. Each piece has a story written inside it: growth patterns, stress points, hidden strengths. Your job is to read that story and honor it in how you shape the wood. Elon, accustomed to commanding teams of engineers rather than working with his own hands, found himself humbled by the precision and patience required. His first attempts at the specialized joints Isaac taught him were clumsy at best. "Don't force it," Isaac advised, watching Elon struggle with a particularly difficult cut. "Listen to what the wood is telling you." "Wood doesn't talk," Elon replied, frustration evident in his voice. Isaac smiled. "Not with words." Gradually, under Isaac's patient guidance, Elon's technique improved. There was something deeply satisfying about creating with his hands, about feeling the direct connection between effort and result. No algorithms, no production lines, no layers of abstraction, just human skill applied to natural materials. Sarah divided her time between helping with construction and cultivating the first batch of fungal material, following the instructions they had brought. Her quick mind grasped both the scientific principles and the practical applications, often making connections that bridge the two worlds. "It's like your brewing process for root beer," she explained to Isaac as they prepared the growth medium. "For the fungus, we're creating the right conditions for beneficial organisms to transform one substance into another." As word spread through the Amish community about the project unfolding at the Fisher farm, curious neighbors began to stop by. Some, like Jacob Yoder, came with skepticism and concern. Others brought genuine interest and occasionally useful suggestions. On Naim, the fourth day of construction, Jacob arrived unannounced, several other Amish elders in tow. They stood silently, watching as Elon, David, Isaac, and Sarah worked on assembling the prototype's wooden frame. "What manner of device is this?" Jacob finally asked, his tone carefully neutral, but his disapproval evident in the set of his shoulders. Isaac straightened, wiping his hands on his apron. "A water collection and storage system, Jacob. Using principles we've always employed, but with some improvements." "Improvements suggested by outsiders," Jacob noted, eyeing Elon and David. "Is this wise, Isaac? To allow English ways to influence ours?" "We're not introducing electricity or engines," Isaac replied calmly. "Just applying new understanding to methods our community has used for generations." The line between acceptable adaptation and dangerous compromise has always been difficult to draw, one of the other elders commented, stepping forward to examine the partially constructed prototype. "But I see no obvious violation of our Ordnung here." Jacob remained unconvinced. "It begins with water storage and ends where? Solar panels, batteries, telephones in our homes?" "No," Elon interjected, setting down his tools. "That's not the intention or the design. Everything we're building here respects your boundaries. It creates no dependencies, requires no connection to the outside world, and can be maintained entirely by your community." "He speaks truth, Jacob," Isaac added. "I would not participate otherwise." "Show me," Jacob challenged, gesturing to the prototype. "Explain how this contraption works and how it aligns with our ways." For the next hour, Isaac and Elon walked Jacob and the elders through the design, explaining each component and its purpose. Sarah demonstrated how the fungal material was being cultivated using traditional Amish composting methods, just with different starter organisms. "The principles are the same ones our forefathers used," Isaac emphasized. "We're simply applying them more effectively. Jacob listened with grudging attention, his expression gradually shifting from outright skepticism to cautious consideration. "And this material?" he asked, examining a sample of the fungal polymer. "It truly comes from God's creation, not man's factories?" "Completely natural," David confirmed. "Grown, not manufactured." By the time the elders departed, the tension had eased somewhat, though Jacob's final words made it clear that acceptance was far from universal. "We will be watching closely, Isaac. The community's well-being must come before any innovations." That evening, as they sat around the Fisher's kitchen table, Sarah voiced what they all felt. "Jacob is not entirely wrong to be cautious. Change, even good change, can have unexpected consequences." "That's true in my world too," Elon acknowledged. "Every technological advancement solves some problems while creating others. The difference is, your community deliberates carefully before adoption. We tend to innovate first and deal with consequences later." "Perhaps there's wisdom in both approaches," Isaac suggested. "Your speed allows for rapid progress. Our caution prevents hasty mistakes. Maybe the best path lies somewhere between." The next several days fell into a productive rhythm. Mornings were spent on construction, with Isaac teaching traditional techniques and Elon and David contributing modern materials knowledge. Afternoons often involved testing components and refining designs. Evenings were for discussion and planning, the next day's work. Sarah's role evolved beyond mere translation. She became an essential bridge between methodologies, often finding elegant ways to adapt modern concepts to Amish practices. Her natural aptitude for both worlds made her an ideal interpreter, not just of language but of ideas. "You have an engineer's mind," Elon told her one afternoon, as she devised a clever modification to their water filter design. "In another life, you might have been leading a research team at Tesla." Sarah smiled, though there was a hint of wistfulness in her expression. "We each have our place. Mine is here, helping my community navigate a changing world without losing our way." As the prototype neared completion, David received an unexpected call from the Tesla team they had worked with. "They've been continuing to explore applications of what they're calling the Amish approach to sustainability," he reported excitedly. "They've already developed 3 new prototypes for water and energy systems based on the principles we discussed. They're finding that stripping away electronic complexity actually improves reliability in many applications." Elon nodded, unsurprised. Sometimes constraints foster the most creative solutions. When you can't rely on adding more technology to solve a problem, you have to think more deeply about the fundamentals. On the 10th day, they completed the prototype, a fully functional water collection, storage, and distribution system that incorporated both Amish woodworking traditions and modern material innovations. Its elegant simplicity belied the sophisticated thinking behind its design. The group stood back, admiring their creation. The wooden structure looked like it might have existed on the farm for generations, yet its capabilities surpassed anything the community had built before. "It needs to be tested," Isaac said, practical as always. "Theory means little until proven in practice." "The forecast calls for rain tomorrow," Sarah noted. "We'll have our chance then." That evening, as Elon made notes on their progress, Isaac joined him on the porch, sitting in a hand-carved rocking chair that had belonged to his father. "Whatever happens with this prototype," the old man said quietly, "I want you to know that this collaboration has been enlightening for all of us." "For me as well," Elon replied sincerely. "More than I expected." "Sarah believes this could be the beginning of something important," Isaac continued. "A new approach that honors our traditions while addressing challenges our community faces." "And what do you believe?" Elon asked. Isaac was silent for a long moment, rocking gently as he gathered his thoughts. "I believe that wisdom can come from unexpected sources, and that true progress preserves what is valuable from the past while finding new paths forward." He paused. "But I also know that Jacob's concerns cannot be dismissed easily. Change must be guided carefully, especially in a community like ours." As night fell, Bringing with it the promise of tomorrow's test, the prototype stood ready, a physical embodiment of their shared vision. Whether the Amish community would accept it remained uncertain, but the collaboration itself had already yielded something valuable, a mutual respect between two worlds that had previously seemed irreconcilable. The rain began shortly after midnight, a gentle patter on the roof that gradually intensified into a steady downpour. By dawn it had become a persistent spring storm, the perfect conditions to test their creation. Elon woke to the sound of Isaac moving about downstairs, dressing. Quickly he joined the old craftsman at the kitchen table, where Sarah was already serving breakfast. "The prototype is collecting water," Isaac reported, a note of satisfaction in his voice. "We should check the pressure regulation system once we've eaten." David arrived moments later, drenched from his brief dash from the barn where he'd been sleeping. "It's working," he announced without preamble. "I checked on my way here. The collection rate is exactly as we calculated." Breakfast was a hurried affair, all of them eager to see their creation in action. Despite the rain, they made their way to the field where the prototype had been installed, integrated with Isaac's existing irrigation system. The wooden structure was functioning precisely as designed, capturing rainwater through a series of carefully angled collection surfaces, filtering it through natural materials, and storing it in cisterns lined with the fungal polymer. Most importantly, the pressure regulation system, a refined version of Isaac's original design, was smoothly controlling the water's release into the irrigation channels. "The flow rate is perfect," Sarah observed, checking the wooden gauges they had installed, "and the filtration is working better than expected." Elon knelt to examine the connection points where their new system interfaced with Isaac's original irrigation channels. No leaks, no back pressure problems. The integration is seamless. As they conducted their assessment, a small group of Amish community members gathered nearby, watching with interest despite the rain. Among them, Elon spotted Jacob Yoder, his expression inscrutable as he observed the prototype's operation. Isaac approached Jacob and the others, explaining in Pennsylvania Dutch how the system worked. There was animated discussion, with occasional glances toward Elon and David. "What are they saying?" Elon asked Sarah, who had remained beside him. "They're impressed by how natural it looks," she translated. "How it seems to belong here, not like an outside technology imposed on our land," she smiled. Even Jacob is acknowledging that it functions well, though he's still concerned about the precedent it sets. By mid-morning, word had spread further, and more community members arrived to see the innovation. Elon and David found themselves explaining the design repeatedly, always emphasizing how it respected Amish values while addressing practical needs. "The beauty of this system," Elon told a group of fascinated Amish farmers, "is that you can build it yourselves, maintain it yourselves, and adapt it to your specific needs. It creates no dependencies." As the day progressed, the prototype continued to perform flawlessly, capturing the steady rainfall and distributing it efficiently to the fields. Even as the storm intensified in the afternoon, the system adjusted, automatically diverting excess water to storage rather than allowing it to cause erosion or flooding. "It's doing exactly what we designed it to do," David observed proudly. "Responding to changing conditions without any electronic sensors or controls. Nature provides the signals," Isaac replied. "We simply created a system attentive enough to read them." By evening, the prototype had proven itself beyond any reasonable doubt. It had handled varying rainfall intensities, maintained consistent water distribution, and demonstrated its capacity for efficient storage, all while operating within the boundaries of Amish principles. As they gathered for dinner, joined by several neighbors who had stayed to discuss the implications, there was a sense of accomplishment tinged with uncertainty about what would follow. "The system works," Isaac acknowledged, addressing the table. "The question now is whether our community will accept it." An older Amish farmer named Levi, who had spent much of the day observing the prototype, spoke up. "I've farmed these lands for 60 years, seen droughts that withered crops in the field and floods that washed away topsoil. If this system can help us weather such extremes without compromising our ways, I see value in it." Jacob, who had been invited to join them, despite his reservations, frowned. The system itself may be acceptable, but what of the process that created it? The collaboration with the English world? Where does that path lead? Perhaps, Sarah suggested carefully, it leads to a middle way. Not adoption of the outside world's technologies, but adaptation of our own traditions to meet new challenges. The conversation continued late into the evening, sometimes heated but always respectful. Elon, who was more accustomed to making unilateral decisions than navigating community consensus, found himself impressed by the thoughtful consideration given to every aspect of the innovation and its potential impacts. As the visitors departed and the household prepared for sleep, Elon realized that the prototype itself, while significant, was secondary to the collaborative process that had created it. Two worlds had come together, each contributing its unique strengths, each learning from the other's perspective. Whether the Amish community ultimately embraced the innovation or not, something valuable had been achieved, a demonstration that progress and tradition were not inherently opposed, that the wisdom of the past and the knowledge of the present could, with mutual respect, create something neither could have achieved alone. The prototype stood ready in the field, collecting the last of the day's rainfall as darkness fell. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, including a formal presentation to the community elders. But for tonight, there was satisfaction in what they had accomplished together, a tangible bridge between worlds that had previously seemed impossibly distant. Morning arrived with clear skies after the previous day's rain. The prototype had performed flawlessly through the night, collecting and distributing water with a precision that even Elon found remarkable, given its lack of electronic components. As he walked the fields with Isaac, they could see the evidence of proper irrigation in the evenly moistened soil, with no waterlogging or dry patches. It worked better than even I expected, Elon admitted, kneeling to examine one of the wooden flow controllers. The responsiveness to varying water pressure is almost like it has sensors. It does, Isaac replied with a slight smile, just not electronic ones. He pointed to an ingenious wooden float mechanism that rose and fell with water levels, automatically adjusting flow rates. The principles have been understood for centuries. Your contribution was in the materials and the system design. Sarah joined them, carrying a notebook where she had been recording data on the system's performance. The fungal polymer linings are performing perfectly, she reported. No seepage, no degradation from overnight exposure. And the water purity readings are excellent, even better filtration than our traditional methods. Elon nodded, his mind already racing with refinements and expansions. What if we took this further? The same principles could be applied to create a complete microgrid for the farm. Not electrical, but a network of interconnected systems for water, heat storage, even mechanical energy transfer. Isaac raised an eyebrow. You're speaking of something larger than our initial agreement. Yes, but still within your boundaries, Elon assured him. No electricity, no complex electronics, nothing that creates outside dependencies. Just an integrated approach that makes each component more efficient by connecting it with others. Before Isaac could respond, they spotted David hurrying toward them across the field, his expression urgent. Weather report, he announced without preamble. There's a major storm system moving this way, potentially severe. Expected to hit in about 2 days. How severe? Isaac asked, immediately practical. Possibility of flash flooding, high winds, David replied. The kind of storm that could damage crops, erode topsoil. Isaac's weathered face showed concern but not alarm. We've weathered such storms before, the community will prepare. This might be an opportunity, Elon suggested carefully, to demonstrate how an enhanced water management system could help protect the farm during extreme weather. Sarah looked thoughtful. The prototype is just one small section. To make a meaningful difference, we'd need to expand it significantly before the storm arrives. Is that even possible? David asked. 2 days isn't much time. Isaac exchanged a glance with Sarah. With help from the community, perhaps. But first, we would need their support. Word of the impending storm had already spread through the Amish settlement. As Isaac, Sarah, Elon, and David returned to the farmhouse. They found several community members waiting to discuss preparations. Among them was Jacob Yoder, his expression grave. "I've called a meeting of the elders this afternoon," Jacob announced, "to discuss both the storm preparations and this innovation." He gestured toward the field where the prototype stood. "Many are curious, some are concerned." "We'll explain everything," Isaac assured him. "The system honors our ways while addressing practical needs." Jacob's expression remained skeptical. "That remains to be determined." The elders' meeting was held in the community's modest schoolhouse. Nearly 30 Amish men and women gathered, seated on simple wooden benches. Elon and David, conspicuous in their modern clothing, stood respectfully to one side while Isaac presented the prototype's design and function. Using careful language that bridged technical concepts with Amish understanding, Isaac explained how the system worked, emphasizing its alignment with community values. "It requires no electricity," he concluded. "Creates no dependency on the outside world. Can be built and maintained using our own skills and locally available materials. And most importantly, it serves our community's needs without changing our way of life." Several elders asked thoughtful questions about specific components and principles. Sarah stepped forward occasionally to provide additional explanations, her clear descriptions helping to demystify the more innovative aspects. Finally, Jacob rose to speak. "The system itself may be acceptable in its current form," he acknowledged, "but I see a dangerous path here. Today, it's a water management system. Tomorrow what? Solar collectors, wind turbines? Where does this collaboration with the English world end?" Murmurs rippled through the gathering as community members considered his words. Elon, who had remained silent until now, respectfully asked permission to address the group. After a moment's hesitation, Jacob nodded. "I understand your concerns," Elon began, conscious of keeping his language simple and direct. "In my world, technology often creates as many problems as it solves. It separates people from natural rhythms, creates dependencies, and sometimes weakens communities rather than strengthening them." The room grew quieter as the Amish listened intently. "What we've created here is different," Elon continued. "It's not about replacing your ways with mine. It's about applying modern understanding to traditional methods, enhancing what already works rather than discarding it. Every component respects your boundaries and values." An older woman spoke up from her bench. "And when these new materials wear out, will we need to come to you for replacements?" "No," Elon assured her. "Sarah has already mastered the cultivation process for the fungal materials. The wooden components can be repaired using traditional craftsmanship. Nothing requires outside expertise or resources to maintain." "With the storm approaching," David added, "this system could help protect your land from erosion and crop damage. And with community help, we believe we could expand it in time to make a difference." Discussion continued for nearly 2 hours. Opinions varied widely, from enthusiasm to deep skepticism. Throughout the debate, Elon was impressed by the community's thoughtful consideration of both immediate practicalities and longer-term implications. Finally, after private deliberation among the elders, Jacob delivered their decision. "The prototype may remain in place," he announced, "and the community will assist in expanding it to help manage the coming storm." He paused, his expression still troubled. "But this is not a permanent acceptance. We will observe how it performs, how it affects our community, and revisit our decision after the storm has passed." It wasn't unqualified support, but it was enough to proceed. As the meeting dispersed, several community members approached Isaac and Sarah offering to help with the expansion. Despite Jacob's reservations, there was clear interest in the innovation. "We need to work quickly," Isaac said as they walked back to the farm. "The storm gives us little time." Elon nodded, already sketching expanded designs in his notebook. "We'll need more of the fungal polymer for additional cisterns. Sarah, can you accelerate the cultivation process?" "With help, yes," she replied. "Several families have offered their assistance." "I'll coordinate with the community on construction teams," Isaac decided. "David, your measurements of the landscape will be essential for optimal placement of the New components. In the hours that followed, the project transformed from an isolated prototype to a community endeavor. Teams were organized, materials gathered, and work began on expanding the water management system to cover vulnerable areas of the farm. Elon worked alongside Amish craftsmen, continually impressed by their skill and efficiency. With minimal verbal communication, they coordinated complex construction tasks, each person intuitively understanding their role in the larger effort. "It's like watching a perfectly choreographed dance," Elon remarked to Isaac during a brief rest. "No project managers, no formal hierarchy, yet everyone knows exactly what to do." Isaac nodded. "We've been raising barns and harvesting crops together our entire lives. The work teaches its own language." By nightfall, significant progress had been made. Multiple new collection points had been established, with channels connecting them to expanded storage cisterns. Sarah's fungal polymer production had been scaled up, with several families now involved in the cultivation process. As darkness fell, work continued by lantern light. The approaching storm lent urgency to their efforts, but there was also a growing sense of shared purpose that transcended mere practicality. Something important was happening, a genuine collaboration between two worlds that had previously existed in parallel. Late that evening, as most of the community returned to their homes to rest before the next day's work, Elon found Sarah still in the workshop, carefully checking the quality of newly produced fungal sheets. "You should rest," he told her. "Tomorrow will be demanding." She looked up, her face showing fatigue but also deep satisfaction. "This is important work. Perhaps the most important I've ever done." "Because of the storm protection?" Sarah shook her head slightly. "That's part of it, but it's more than that." She carefully set aside the material she'd been examining. "Our community values tradition for good reasons. It provides stability, connection to our past, protection from harmful influences. But traditions that cannot adapt eventually become burdens rather than strengths." Elon leaned against the workbench, listening intently. "What you and grandfather have created together," Sarah continued, "is a path forward that honors who we are while addressing the challenges we face. It's neither blind resistance to change nor thoughtless adoption of the new. It's wisdom." "Your grandfather is the wise one," Elon said. "I'm just an engineer looking at problems differently." Sarah smiled. "Perhaps that's why you've succeeded, where others failed. You came not to change us, but to learn from us, even while offering your own knowledge." The next day dawned gray and humid, the air heavy with approaching precipitation. Weather reports from David's tablet indicated the storm had accelerated and intensified. They now had less than a day before it would hit. Work resumed with increased urgency. The expanded system now covered nearly half the farm's cultivated land, with strategic placement focusing on the most vulnerable areas. Isaac's deep knowledge of the land's contours guided their efforts, ensuring maximum effectiveness with the limited time available. By mid-afternoon, dark clouds loomed on the horizon. Wind gusts began to bend the taller trees, and animals grew, restless in the barns. The construction teams worked with quiet determination, securing the last components as the storm's leading edge approached. Jacob Yoder arrived as the final connections were being completed, his wagon loaded with additional supplies for the community's storm preparations. He surveyed the expanded system with a mixture of caution and reluctant admiration. "It is impressive," he acknowledged to Isaac, "though still untested." "We'll know soon enough," Isaac replied, glancing at the darkening sky. As the first heavy raindrops began to fall, the last of the work crews departed, heading for the safety of their homes. Isaac, Sarah, Elon, and David remained at the Fisher farm, making final adjustments to ensure the system was fully operational. "All collection points are active," David reported, returning from a quick inspection. "Flow regulators are responding, as designed. The primary cisterns are secure," Sarah added. "Overflow channels are clear." Isaac nodded satisfaction. "Now we wait, and watch, and pray." The storm arrived with surprising ferocity. Rain lashed down in sheets, driven by powerful gusts that bent even the sturdiest trees. Lightning flashed across the darkened sky, followed by crashes of thunder that seemed to shake the very ground. From the relative safety of Isaac's sturdy farmhouse, they monitored the system's performance through windows and occasional dashes to the porch when the rain temporarily lessened. "The collection rate is exceeding our calculations," David observed, his voice raised over the storm's roar. "But the regulators are compensating, directing excess flow to the secondary storage. The fields closest to the creek would normally be flooding by now," Isaac noted, peering through the window at land that remained properly drained despite the deluge. "The diversion channels are working." The worst of the storm lasted through the night. While neighboring farms struggled with flooding and erosion, the fisher land remained remarkably stable. The expanded water management system performed beyond expectations, capturing the destructive force of the downpour and transforming it into stored resources for future use. When morning came, the storm had passed, leaving behind a landscape of fallen branches and swollen streams. Isaac, Sarah, Elon, and David emerged to assess the damage and check the system's status. "Minimal erosion," Isaac reported after walking the fields. "And the water storage cisterns are at capacity, enough to irrigate through weeks of drought." Other community members began to arrive, coming to check on the fishers and to see how the innovative system had performed. Many expressed surprise at the limited damage compared to their own properties. Jacob Yoder arrived with several other elders. They walked the property in silence, observing the evidence of the system's effectiveness. Fields that should have been washed out remained intact. Topsoil that would have been carried away still covered the ground. And perhaps most importantly, the farm's drinking water remained clean and accessible, unlike some households whose wells had been contaminated by floodwater. "It worked," Jacob finally acknowledged, his tone measured. "Better than I expected." "It worked because it was built on principles we already understood," Isaac replied, "just applied in new ways." As the day progressed, more community members came to see the results. The conversation gradually shifted from assessing storm damage to discussing the potential for similar systems on other farms. That afternoon, Elon found himself sitting with Isaac on the porch watching as Sarah explained the fungal polymer cultivation process to a group of interested Amish women. "She's found her calling," Isaac observed with quiet pride, "bridging our world with the knowledge that can help us thrive." "She has a remarkable mind," Elon agreed, "and the perfect temperament for this work, respectful of tradition, but open to new possibilities." Isaac nodded slowly. "When I was a young man, our elders feared that allowing propane gas for refrigeration would lead us down a slippery slope to full electrification and loss of our ways. Yet we adapted propane because it served genuine needs without creating dependencies or changing who we are." He gestured toward the water system visible in the distance. "Perhaps this innovation will follow a similar path. Accepted because it strengthens rather than weakens our community." "That was always the goal," Elon said. "Not to change your ways, but to support them." "You've learned something from us as well," Isaac observed. "I see it in your eyes, a new perspective on your own work." Elon smiled, acknowledging the truth in Isaac's words. "In my world, we often mistake complexity for advancement. We solve problems by adding layers of technology, creating systems so intricate that only specialists can understand them, let alone repair them." He looked out over the simple but elegant water management system they had created together. "What I've learned here is that true innovation isn't always about adding. Sometimes, it's about distilling, finding the essential principles and applying them mindfully. Balance," Isaac said simply. "Finding the middle path between resistance to all change and acceptance of change without consideration of its effects." Later that day, as community members continued to assess storm damage and discuss the water system's performance, Jacob approached Elon directly for the first time. "Your system protected Isaac's farm when others suffered," he acknowledged. "I cannot deny its effectiveness." "It's not just my system," Elon replied. "It wouldn't exist without Isaac's wisdom or your community's craftsmanship. It's truly a collaboration." Jacob considered this. Perhaps that is why it succeeded where other outside influences have failed. You did not come to change us, but to work alongside us. His expression remained serious. I still have concerns about the path forward, but I am willing to continue the conversation. Coming from Jacob, this was significant concession. Elon recognized it with a respectful nod. As evening approached, the community gathered at the Fisher farm for a meal to celebrate their survival of the storm with minimal damage. Tables were set up in the yard, laden with food brought by many households. The atmosphere was one of gratitude and cautious optimism. During the meal, Isaac stood to address the gathered families. "We have been blessed," he began, "not only with protection from the storm, but with new understanding. For generations, our community has carefully considered which innovations to accept and which to reject. Today, we face new challenges: more extreme weather, changing growing seasons, pressures on our land and water. The system that helped protect our farm represents a potential path forward, one that respects our traditions while addressing these new challenges." He gestured toward Elon and David. "Our visitors came not to change us, but to learn from us even as they shared their knowledge. The result was something neither would have created alone, a true collaboration of different wisdoms." Sarah, sitting beside her grandfather, spoke next. "I've learned how to cultivate the materials used in the system," she explained, "and I'm willing to teach any who wish to learn. This knowledge belongs to our community now, not just to our English friends." Throughout the evening, Elon observed the community's response. What had begun as skepticism had transformed, at least for many, into cautious interest. The system's performance during the storm had demonstrated its value in terms they could directly appreciate: protected fields, preserved topsoil, clean water. As darkness fell and lanterns were lit, Elon found a quiet moment to speak with David. "What do you think the board would say if they could see us now?" he asked with a smile, sitting at an Amish community dinner, celebrating the success of a completely non-electronic water management system. David laughed softly. "They'd be baffled. But the engineers back at Tesla are already applying principles from this project to next-generation sustainability designs. Sometimes you have to step backward to move forward in a better direction. That's what I've realized," Elon agreed. "We've been so focused on adding complexity that we've missed the elegance of simplicity." He watched as Isaac conversed with community members, patiently explaining aspects of the system's design. "What we've created here isn't just a water management system. It's a model for a different kind of progress, one that builds on traditional wisdom rather than discarding it." As the community gathering continued into the evening, a sense of possibility hung in the air. The storm had tested both the physical infrastructure and the community's openness to innovation. Both had proven stronger than expected. The expanded water system stood as tangible proof that modern understanding and traditional values could work in harmony, not through compromise that weakened both, but through collaboration that strengthened each. Whether this particular innovation would be fully accepted remained uncertain, but a door had been opened that could not easily be closed again. Later, as most of the visitors departed and the Fisher household prepared for sleep, Sarah found Elon sitting on the porch steps, gazing at the star-filled sky that had emerged after the storm. "Grandfather says you'll be leaving soon," she said, sitting beside him. Elon nodded. "I need to return to my companies, but this isn't an ending. It's a beginning." "Of what?" Sarah asked. "A new direction," Elon replied. "Not just for your community, but for mine as well. What we've created together challenges assumptions on both sides, about progress, about sustainability, about what technology should be." Sarah was quiet for a moment, considering his words. "Will you come back to see how it develops?" "If I'm welcome," Elon said. "There's still much I can learn here." "You'll always be welcome at our table," Sarah assured him. "And I think after today, in many other homes as well." As they sat in companionable silence watching the stars, Elon reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought him to this moment. He had come seeking a brief escape from the pressures of his high-tech world, and had found instead a profound re-examination of his fundamental assumptions about innovation and progress. The water management system they had created together represented more than just a technological solution to practical problems. It embodied a philosophy, one that valued resilience over complexity, community over individuality, and wisdom over mere advancement. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, including a formal presentation to the broader Amish community about the system's design and potential applications. But tonight, under the vast canopy of stars, there was a sense of accomplishment that transcended the specific innovation. Two worlds had come together, not in compromise, but in true collaboration, creating something that neither could have achieved alone. And in that collaboration lay a model for a different kind of future, one that honored the past while addressing the challenges of the present, a middle path that might perhaps offer wisdom to both worlds. The morning after the storm dawned clear and brilliant, as if nature herself was offering a fresh start. Throughout the Amish settlement, families emerged to assess damage and begin repairs. The contrast between the Fisher farm and neighboring properties was striking. Where others faced washed-out fields and damaged structures, Isaac's land remained largely intact, protected by the innovative water management system. Word spread quickly. By mid-morning, a steady stream of visitors arrived at the Fisher farm, curious to see the system that had performed so admirably during the storm. Sarah and Isaac led small groups around the property, explaining the principles behind the design and emphasizing how it aligned with Amish values while addressing practical needs. Elon and David, conscious of their status as outsiders, maintained a respectful distance, allowing the Fishers to present the innovation in their own terms to their community. They focused instead on documenting the system's performance and making minor adjustments where needed. The distribution channels near the eastern field need slight recalibration, David noted as they inspected a section that had experienced heavier flow than anticipated. But even with that issue, the efficiency exceeded our projections by nearly 20%. Elon nodded, making notes in a small leather-bound journal he had taken to carrying instead of his usual digital devices. The responsive nature of the wooden valve system is remarkable. It actually performs better under stress than under normal conditions. The increased pressure creates more precise self-regulation. As they worked, Elon noticed Jacob Yoder moving among the visitors, listening carefully to explanations and observing the system's components with a thoughtful expression. The elder's initial opposition seemed to have softened, though caution remained evident in his demeanor. By early afternoon, Bishop Stoltzfus, the most senior spiritual leader in the community, arrived with several other church leaders. His presence lent additional gravity to the day's discussions. Tall and dignified with a flowing white beard, the bishop carried himself with quiet authority as Isaac guided him through a detailed tour of the system. The principles are not new, Isaac explained, showing how the wooden mechanisms regulated water flow. Many were known to our grandfathers. What's different is how they're applied and some of the materials used. The bishop examined the fungal polymer lining of a cistern, testing its texture with weathered fingers. And this material, it's grown, not manufactured? Yes, Sarah confirmed, stepping forward with samples at various stages of cultivation, from mushroom mycelium and agricultural waste. We can produce it ourselves using methods similar to our traditional composting. The bishop nodded thoughtfully. Ingenious. And it contains no forbidden elements? No electrical components? No dependencies on the English world? None, Isaac assured him. Every component can be produced, understood, and maintained within our community. As the day progressed, Elon observed a gradual shift in the atmosphere. What had begun as skeptical curiosity was evolving into genuine interest. Community members who had initially kept their distance now asked detailed questions about implementation, costs, and techniques. Late in the afternoon, Bishop Stoltzfus requested a formal meeting to discuss the innovation's future in the community. Word spread quickly, and by early evening nearly the entire settlement had gathered at the community meeting house, a simple, spacious building used for both worship and community decisions. Elon and David sat quietly at the back, understanding that this was an internal community matter. where their direct participation would be inappropriate. Isaac, Sarah, and Jacob took positions at the front, along with the bishop and other church leaders. The bishop opened the meeting with a prayer, then addressed the gathered families. "We face an unusual situation," he began, his deep voice carrying easily through the room. "For generations, our community has carefully considered which innovations to accept and which to reject, guided by our commitment to humility, simplicity, and separation from the world." He gestured toward the window, where the aftermath of the storm was still visible in bent trees and muddy roads. "Yet we cannot ignore that the Fisher farm was protected when others suffered. We must consider whether this system represents an acceptable adaptation or a dangerous compromise." Isaac was invited to speak first. Rising slowly to his feet, the elderly craftsman surveyed the familiar faces before him. Neighbors, friends, fellow believers with whom he had shared a lifetime of work and worship. "I have lived 82 years in this community," he began. "In that time, I've seen many changes. Some accepted, some rejected. Each generation faces new challenges and must discern how to remain faithful while adapting to changing circumstances." He described how the water management system had developed, emphasizing the collaborative process and the careful attention to Amish values and boundaries. "This is not about adopting the outside world's ways," Isaac explained. "It's about applying our own principles more effectively to address challenges our forefathers didn't face. More extreme weather, changing growing seasons, pressures on our land." Sarah spoke next, describing the fungal polymer cultivation process and how it could be maintained entirely within the community. Her clear explanations demystified the more innovative aspects, making them accessible to even the most traditional members. "We've already begun teaching several families how to grow the materials," she noted. "The knowledge now belongs to our community, not just to our English friends." Then Jacob Yoder rose to speak. The room grew particularly quiet, everyone aware of his initial opposition. Jacob's influence as a respected elder meant his position would carry significant weight. "I have been cautious about this innovation," he acknowledged, his voice measured. "As I should be. Our separate way of life has preserved our faith and community for generations. Each new technology, no matter how innocent it seems, carries the potential to lead us away from our calling." Heads nodded throughout the room. This was familiar ground, a concern shared by many. "Yet," Jacob continued, surprising many with this turn, "I must also acknowledge what I have witnessed. The system protected the Fisher farm during the storm. It operates within our principles. No electricity, no components we cannot produce ourselves, no dependency on the outside world." He paused, seeming to choose his words with particular care. "Most significantly, it was developed through a collaborative process that respected our values. Our English visitors," he nodded toward Elon and David, "did not come to change us but to work alongside us, learning from our ways even as they shared their knowledge." The room remained silent, many surprised by Jacob's apparent shift in perspective. "I still have concerns," Jacob concluded. "But I believe we should continue to explore this path carefully, always testing each step against our commitments to faith and community." Following Jacob's remarks, other community members spoke, some expressing enthusiasm, others voicing caution. Throughout the discussion, Elon was impressed by the thoughtful consideration given to both practical benefits and deeper values. Finally, Bishop Stoltzfus called for silent prayer, asking the community to seek divine guidance before reaching a decision. For several minutes, the room was completely still, heads bowed in contemplation. When the silence ended, the bishop addressed the community once more. "After hearing all perspectives and seeking God's wisdom, I believe we should move forward with careful implementation of this water management system, with several conditions." He listed specific boundaries. No electrical components would be permitted. All materials must be producible within the community. Techniques must be widely shared rather than held by a few specialists, and each implementation must be approved by church leaders to ensure alignment with community values. "With these safeguards," the bishop concluded, "I believe this innovation can strengthen our community without compromising our way of life." The I Decision wasn't unanimous. Several families still expressed reservations, but the general consensus supported moving forward. As the meeting dispersed, there was a sense of cautious optimism. A community united in seeking a path that honored tradition while addressing present challenges. Outside, as twilight deepened into evening, Elon found himself approached by Bishop Stoltzfus. "Mr. Musk," the bishop greeted him, "I understand you'll be departing soon." "Tomorrow," Elon confirmed. "I need to return to my companies, though I hope to visit again if that would be welcome." The bishop nodded thoughtfully. "You have shown unusual respect for our ways. Most outsiders either dismiss us as backward or view us as curiosities. You did neither." "I came to learn," Elon replied simply, "and I've learned more than I expected." "What will you take back to your world from ours?" the bishop asked, genuine curiosity in his eyes. Elon considered the question carefully. "A different perspective on progress," he finally answered. "In my industry, we're constantly racing forward, always assuming that newer and more complex means better. Here I've seen the value of thoughtful constraints, of asking not just, can we, but should we?" The bishop smiled slightly. "That wisdom may be more valuable than any water system." The following morning, Elon and David prepared for departure. Their tools and equipment were packed into the rented truck, leaving no trace of modern technology behind. The only additions to the farm were the water management system itself and the knowledge that had been shared. Sarah had risen early to prepare a farewell breakfast, joined by Isaac and several neighbors who had worked closely on the project. The meal was simple but abundant: fresh eggs, homemade bread, preserves, and coffee. As they ate, conversations flowed easily between discussions of practical next steps for the water system and deeper reflections on the collaboration's meaning. "Several families have already requested similar systems," Isaac reported. "Sarah will lead the implementation with help from those who worked on our prototype." "I've prepared detailed drawings and instructions," Sarah added, showing Elon a carefully illustrated manual she had created. "Everything needed to build and maintain the system, written in a way our community can understand and use." After breakfast, Isaac invited Elon for a final walk around the farm. As they moved through fields, still damp from the storm but undamaged thanks to their innovation, the elderly craftsman spoke reflectively. "When I was a young man, I sometimes chafed at our community's restrictions. I wondered what I might have accomplished with modern tools and education." He paused, looking out over the land his family had farmed for generations. "Now, at the end of my life, I see the wisdom in our way. We've preserved something valuable, not just techniques and traditions, but a way of being in the world that's increasingly rare." "And now?" Elon asked. "With this new system and the changes it might bring?" Isaac smiled. "Now I see that preservation doesn't have to mean stagnation. We can honor our past while adapting to new challenges." He turned to face Elon directly. "Your visit has helped me understand that innovation, properly understood, isn't always about creating something new. Sometimes it's about rediscovering old wisdom and applying it in new contexts." They had reached the original prototype section, where the wooden mechanisms continued their silent, efficient work of managing water flow. Isaac placed a hand on one of the carved regulation valves, a perfect integration of his traditional craftsmanship and Elon's innovative design. "This will be my legacy," the old man said quietly. "Not just the system itself, but the principle it represents, that we can move forward without losing our way." When they returned to the farmhouse, they found several additional visitors had arrived, including Jacob Yoder. The elder approached Elon with a surprisingly warm expression. "I've been considering our conversations," Jacob said without preamble. "Your respect for our boundaries has been unexpected." "Your boundaries have wisdom built into them," Elon replied. "They're not arbitrary restrictions but careful protections for what you value most." Jacob nodded, seeming pleased with this understanding. "I've brought something for you." He handed Elon a small wooden box, beautifully crafted with dovetail joints and a simple oil finish. made by my grandson, a reminder of your time among us. Inside the box was a miniature working model of one of the water regulation mechanisms, carved with extraordinary precision from a single piece of maple. It was both a functional demonstration and a work of art. "Thank you," Elon said, genuinely touched by the gift. "I'll keep this on my desk as a reminder of what I've learned here." As the time for departure approached, the gathering moved outside. Several other community members had arrived to say farewell, including families who had initially been most skeptical of the innovation. Sarah stood with her grandfather, her expression a mixture of gratitude and determination. "We'll send updates on how the system performs in different conditions," she promised. "And any refinements we discover." "I'd like that," Elon replied, "and I'll share what my team learns from applying these principles in other contexts." He hesitated, then added, "With your permission, of course." "Knowledge is meant to be shared," Isaac said, "as long as our community's values are respected in how it's presented." David, who had been loading the last of their belongings, joined them. "The board wants a full presentation next week," he told Elon. "They're already talking about a new sustainability division based on what we've learned here." "Tell them we'll need a different approach," Elon replied. "Less focus on complexity, more on fundamental principles and long-term resilience." As they prepared to depart, Bishop Stoltzfus stepped forward. "Before you leave, we would like to offer a blessing for your journey," he said. "If that would be acceptable." Elon nodded, and the community formed a circle around him and David. The bishop spoke a simple prayer in Pennsylvania Dutch, his deep voice carrying across the farmyard. Though Elon couldn't understand the words, their meaning was clear. Gratitude for the collaboration and hopes for its continued fruits. When the prayer concluded, there were handshakes all around. No photographs, no formal contracts, no digital exchanges, just the human connection that had formed the true foundation of their work together. As Elon and David drove away, Elon watched through the rearview mirror as the Fisher farm receded in the distance. Sarah stood beside her grandfather, both raising their hands in farewell. Around them, members of their community gathered, a living embodiment of the balance between tradition and adaptation that had made their collaboration possible. "What happens now?" David asked as they turned onto the main road. "With everything we've learned?" Elon was quiet for a moment, considering the question. "We rethink our approach to sustainability," he finally replied. "Not just in water management, but across all our initiatives. Less reliance on complex technology, more on timeless principles. Systems that communities can understand, maintain, and adapt themselves." "The board might resist," David cautioned. "It's a significant shift from our current trajectory." "Then we'll need to convince them," Elon said with a smile. "The same way we convinced Jacob Yoder. Not with arguments, but with results." As the rural landscape gave way to more developed areas, Elon felt the pull of his other world, the demands and possibilities of his companies, the global challenges he sought to address. Yet something fundamental had shifted in his perspective, a recalibration of his understanding of progress and innovation. The small wooden box sat on the seat beside him, a tangible reminder of what he had discovered among the Amish. That true, sustainability wasn't just about advanced technology, but about creating systems aligned with human needs and natural principles, systems that strengthened rather than weakened communities. 3 months later, Elon stood before a packed auditorium at a global sustainability conference. On the screen behind him was a simple image, the water management system at the Fisher farm, its wooden mechanisms regulating flow with elegant precision. "What you're looking at," Elon told the audience, "is not a step backward but a step sideways, into a different understanding of what progress means." He described the collaboration with the Amish community, explaining how it had challenged fundamental assumptions about technology and sustainability. The audience, initially skeptical, grew increasingly engaged as he shared concrete results: dramatically improved resource efficiency, near-zero environmental impact, and systems that communities could maintain themselves without specialized expertise. The most sustainable technology, Elon concluded, isn't necessarily the most advanced. It's the one that can be widely implemented, easily understood, and maintained by the people who depend on it. It's technology that creates resilience rather than dependency. After his presentation, a journalist approached him. "Is this really the direction you're taking your companies?" she asked. "Away from cutting-edge technology toward these simpler solutions?" "Not away from advanced technology," Elon clarified. "Toward appropriate technology. Sometimes that means simplicity rather than complexity. Sometimes it means mechanical rather than electronic. Always it means asking what truly serves human needs and planetary health rather than assuming newer equals better." Later that week, Elon received a letter, an actual paper letter written in neat, precise handwriting. It was from Sarah Fisher, updating him on developments in the Amish community. The water management system had been implemented on 12 additional farms, she reported, with modifications for different soil conditions and terrain. The fungal material cultivation had become a community project, with several families specializing in production techniques that had been refined over the past months. Most significantly, a formal framework had been established for evaluating potential innovations against community values, a thoughtful process that allowed for adaptation while maintaining core principles. "Grandfather wishes me to tell you," Sarah wrote, "that your visit has sparked what he calls a renaissance of purposeful innovation within our community. We remain separate from the modern world in many ways, but we have found a path to engage with new knowledge while honoring our traditions." She concluded with an invitation. "The Harvest Festival is approaching. You would be welcome at our table to see what has grown from the seeds planted during your visit." Elon smiled as he finished reading. He had already been planning a return visit, curious to see how the project had developed. More than that, he wanted to experience again the clarity he had found among the Amish, their thoughtful intentionality about which technologies to adopt and which to forego. In the months since his departure, the principles he had learned at the Fisher farm had influenced decisions across his companies. A new division focused on appropriate technology was developing solutions for communities worldwide, systems that combined modern knowledge with locally maintainable implementation. The most promising projects were those that, like the Amish water system, struck a balance between innovation and accessibility, creating resilience rather than dependency. Early results showed dramatically improved adoption rates and long-term sustainability compared to more technology-intensive approaches. As Elon placed Sarah's letter in the wooden box Jacob had given him, now a repository for correspondence, from the Amish community, he reflected on the unexpected journey that had begun with his impulsive drive into Pennsylvania farmland. He had gone seeking a brief escape from the pressures of his high-tech world and had found instead a profound recalibration of his understanding of progress. The collaboration with Isaac Fisher and his community had opened a new direction, not just for specific technologies, but for a fundamental approach to innovation. In the elegant wooden mechanisms of the water management system, two seemingly incompatible worlds had found common ground, a shared commitment to practical solutions that honored both human needs and natural systems. Neither world had compromised its essential values. Instead, each had discovered unexpected wisdom in the other's perspective. That unexpected harmony between tradition and innovation, between simplicity and sophistication, between the wisdom of the past and the challenges of the future, represented, perhaps the most important innovation of all, a new understanding of what progress truly meant. As Elon turned back to the technical drawings spread across his desk, sketches for new projects inspired by Amish principles but designed for global implementation, he smiled at the irony. The man known for pushing technological boundaries had discovered some of his most valuable insights in a community that deliberately limited technology's role. Yet that apparent contradiction contained a deeper truth, that the path forward might sometimes require a thoughtful step back, that true innovation wasn't always about adding complexity, but sometimes about rediscovering simplicity, and that the most sustainable technologies were those that empowered communities rather than creating dependencies. In bridging these two worlds, Elon had found not a compromise but a synthesis, a new direction that honored the best of both perspectives. And in that unexpected harmony lay the seeds of a different kind of future, one where technology served human needs and values rather than reshaping them in its image. The wooden box sat on the corner of his desk, a constant reminder of what he had learned from an 82-year-old Amish craftsman in his community, that sometimes the most revolutionary innovation wasn't a leap forward but a thoughtful integration of timeless wisdom with present challenges. And that, perhaps, was the true legacy of his journey into Amish country. Not just a more efficient water management system, but a fundamental recalibration of what progress meant and how it might be achieved. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.